Hey everyone, welcome back to Engelbard Gaming. First up, what you're looking at is the arcade version of Street Fighter 2. It was an absolute masterpiece, one of the greatest and most influential games ever created. I've covered ports of the various versions of Street Fighter 2 to other platforms for years now, showing you how several home versions stacked up against the arcade originals on platforms including the Super Nintendo, Genesis, PC Engine, and 3DO to name just a few. Most of them were pretty well done for the hardware they were on. With so many good versions of SF2 on consoles from the 16-bit era and beyond, you might think a version for a 16-bit computer like the Commodore Amiga would have turned out pretty well too. If you think that, well, you're wrong! When you look at it in still pictures like this, it seems like maybe this one came out okay. I mean, considering the Amiga OCS or original chipset's capabilities, I'd say this looks pretty impressive. OCS Amigas like the 1000, 500, and 2000 can only show 32 colors on screen out of a total palette of 4096 in the most commonly used video modes on the platform. So not too bad as we look at it, right? But once we get things in motion, it falls apart, which you'll see in just a few seconds. But first, why am I doing this complete trash episode today? Well, you see, I f***ed up a little bit in my last video, and in the rare event that such a thing happens, I punish myself for your amusement by suffering through an entire terrible game. Today's instrument of digital torture is none other than Street Fighter 2 for the Commodore Amiga. And, well, let's get this over with. Here we are underway, and my god, this is awful. If I were to estimate the frame rate of this game, I'd say it's somewhere around 15 to 20 frames per second versus 60 for the arcade original and 16-bit era home console versions. As I said before, it looks good in still pictures, but it's a disaster in motion. Also, yes, it did actually run in a small window like this, as did many other Western home computer games of that era. Let's just make this a bit bigger for your viewing pleasure, and there we are. Also a note, I cut out all load times and losses to keep this video at a reasonable length. Alright, now Amiga Street Fighter 2 came out on 4 floppy disks that totaled more than 3.4 megabytes of storage space, making this the equivalent to roughly a 28 megabit cartridge from back in the day. Despite all that space to work with, we get flat backgrounds, loads of missing animation, no line scrolling on the floors, almost no background animation in the crowds, and various details are missing in almost all stages. Nearly all the digital voice samples have been removed, with just a scant few remaining. This version of the game was done by a small Western company called Creative Materials, and likely without source code access, but still, the cuts are extremely harsh. You may have also noticed by now that Ryu's music is playing in this stage. Well, guess what? There are only 6 songs total included in this entire game. As far as the music goes, we get the title theme music, Ryu's theme, Ken's theme, Balrog's theme, and for some insane reason they decided to use the Character Select song as a battle theme. All these play randomly throughout. Oh, and there's one more song. The song from Zangief's ending plays during the final bonus round with the oil drums. And when it comes to controls here, remember, most Amiga games only support single fire button joysticks. There are a lot of control options in this particular game, but the best one to use is a 2-button gamepad option. How can you play such a really limited version of the game? Well, with different direction and button press timings and stuff like that, you get to do most of the moves, but it's like playing an entirely different game versus the original arcade version, honestly. It doesn't remotely feel like real Street Fighter 2. And the special moves are in here, but good luck pulling them off. You'll see almost none of them in this video, because I could rarely get any to work, and that was true back in the day also. Now you guys have probably seen my many other Street Fighter videos, and you know I have zero problems pulling off moves in any of the good versions of the game, and I'm actually really good at it. So this is strictly a problem with this Amiga version of the game. Also, the collision detection is atrocious, and you'll have to deal with other garbage like the game just flat out missing button presses. Now, most of my audience, like me, is from the US. However, unlike me, most of you didn't grow up with a mother and lots of family in Scotland who would regularly bring back UK-based gaming magazines. If you don't know about UK gaming magazines, which I've mentioned quite a bit in the past, ooh boy, you'll find a bunch of reviews for this game, Amiga Street Fighter 2. They gave it sky-high review scores like 85 and 90 out of 100. One of the reviews said they could almost never pull off any of the special moves, but they couldn't complain. Excuse me? Yeah, UK gaming mags in the 80s and 90s reviewing games on computers that were popular over there certainly were a thing. Anyway, from this point on, I'll shift over to proper commentary. I just wanted to get all of that info out there first. And ordinarily, this is where we would see some loading take place. I mean, it's not too egregious, but it takes a while. So now we're moving on to Chun-Li. And again, you can hear the completely incorrect background music, which is not a surprise since, as I mentioned, there's only 4 songs that play in the background during the entire game, no matter who you're fighting. Now you'll see a lot of times where Ryu will sort of have this stunted, weird-looking little forward lunge animation. That's what it does when you go to throw somebody in this game. And it interprets a throw as you pushing forward and the punch or kick button while you're sort of in close range, which sounds just like how it works in like the original arcade version or the home console versions, but it feels totally different. And very often, your character will just flat out miss the throw, and you'll be stuck looking at just the silly little animation of them lunging forward. And just getting these attacks to work, especially in the air, the button presses have to be so precisely timed, and even then, there's a shot, that the system is not going to recognize that you even pressed that button at all, and just no attack will happen. Now, there are ways to mitigate this a little bit. There are some directions when you press where I've found it is more likely to produce an attack, consistently than in other directions. But, who knows? Your mileage may vary. You might find that pressing in the opposite direction works better for you. But generally, if you jump, forward and then press, towards the enemy and press the kick button, you'll get, a normal forward jump kick. It'll be the one that would be on the heavy attack button, typically in the arcade, and console versions. And then if you jump straight up and then hold to the left, or away from the enemy, and then press the kick button, you'll get sort of the straight up normal, attack that Ryu does in most games, where he just kind of puts his legs straight out. Looks like one of the frames of animation from the Hurricane kick. And you can see the herky-jerky scrolling a lot of the times when you grab and throw enemies, especially when you're near one of the sides, one of the ends of the arenas. And it's just, everything about this is so sloppy. And it's such a shame, because they really did do, I feel, a strong job in translating the graphics to this platform, despite the cut-down colors and making everything small and play on a tiny portion of the screen. Even with all that, which is a problem that, you have in a similar but less distracting way on the Super Nintendo and Genesis and PC Engine versions of the game, despite it all, the Amiga version looks good, and the proportions of the characters, I would say, are closer to the arcade version than we saw on the console ones. Now here's the first bonus round with the car. Of course, normally, in real versions of the game, when you do Ryu's, roundhouse kick right on the edge of the car on that side, you'll hit it twice. You do that twice, it breaks everything on that side. You jump over, and then you can just keep on doing this on the other side. In this one, you only get one kick. Only one of them connects, even though it's supposed to be a double connect move. And then, aside from that, you do like the roundhouse kick, which is hilariously making contact, even though it's not hitting the car at all. I'm not sure if damage is actually being done here, so I go back to the other side and give it another bit of a whirl over there before time runs out, and I fail to destroy the car. Perhaps for the first time ever in the history of me playing any version of Street Fighter 2. Nice job, Creative Materials. Alright, here we go to dhalsim. This was the first fight in this game where I really ran into trouble. Now once again, in a still picture, this background I think really looks great. I've got to give them credit for that. And we've got the 3 rows of elephants, unlike most of the 16-bit home versions of the game. Unfortunately, we don't get to see the trunks move, we don't hear the elephant screams or anything in the background. So they're just there. Everything is here. It's just like you're fighting on a still painting for the most part. And there you can see I dizzied dhalsim with, quick kicks. And then I dizzied him again immediately with 3 more quick kicks. Or the short kicks. And I will say that, I did use save states and stuff in here, because my goal was just to show you this game so we could talk about it, not to show you that I'm good at it, because I'm not good at it. I could barely make this game do what I wanted to with the controls. And even then, it was a stretch to say that it ever did what I wanted to. I got it to do some things and enough for me to finish it and play it all the way through. But yeah, the go-to move, if you can make it work, is to get an enemy in the corner and then just do 3 of the short kicks keep them dizzy as long as you can keep them over there. And the problem is the controls are really imprecise. So sometimes when you go to do those short kicks, you may end up going and throwing the enemy instead. And throws in this version of the game, for some reason, do extremely little damage. Like, almost none. Alright, so there's dhalsim handled. Where are we headed to next? To Japan to fight E Honda. Alright, so E Honda, once again, the stage looks nice. Although this one suffers from a lot of dithering that we don't really see too much. Like in the Super Nintendo or Genesis versions especially. But again, looks good. We don't have any of the destructible objects in the foreground or background like we saw in the arcade or higher-end console versions of the game. Even so, I could have lived with that if the rest of this, played relatively well. I mean, it's really frustrating that special moves like fireballs and hurricane kicks and the Dragon Punch are nearly impossible to do on this. And we've almost got Honda. Can we take him down? Or is he going to beat me? There's almost no health left, and there we go. Snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. While Honda's weird laid-out animation has him floating up a little bit, because the characters are placed too high on the ground, so when they lay down, if you look at them, you'll see their feet usually sticking up in weird places, because they should be lower. But whatever, that's a nitpick that I don't really care too much about. It doesn't really affect gameplay, but it is there, so I thought I'd mention it. And I did look for a consistent way to cheese the game, and I couldn't really find one that worked every time. It seemed like the other go-to move was just doing that roundhouse kick where you would normally hit twice, once high up in the air and then once in front of you a little bit. But even then, a lot of the collision detection was so wonky on it that very often you would see your foot contact the enemy, it would really overlap them quite a bit, but it wouldn't hit them. So, more frustrations there. Now, if you set the difficulty to this game lower when you start it, I mean, it really does make it a lot easier. I probably should have done that, but I wanted you to see what an actual gameplay session of this would conceivably look like if you were actually trying, with the standard settings and everything. Now, my fight with Guile here, when I was originally recording, probably lasted a good 10-15 minutes. He kept beating me, because his moves are frankly just a lot better. Here, all these punches you're seeing here, these are all my failed attempts to try and throw a fireball. I was determined to make it happen once in this fight, and unfortunately it was not meant to be. Now you can watch some hilarious enemy dancing as they react to some of the moves you do. You get down in a corner and just spam those short kicks, you'll see them often kind of take a ginger one step forward and then lunge back a little bit, one step forward, lunge back a little bit. You're going to really get to see some fun with that with Balrog later on. Speaking of Balrog, I hope you like his song, because that's the one we hear by far the most in this game. We got a few Ryus, a few Kens, and then a whole lot of Balrog. And then I think a couple of instances of the character select music. And the music is completely, truly random. Because if you die and continue, it'll play a different song than it was playing during your first time when you lost. In the same stage. So, no consistency to that whatsoever. And as far as the quality of the music goes, as you can hear, it's not good. The Amiga uses digital samples, sort of like the Super Nintendo. It has a lot fewer channels though, it only has 4, and we have hard stereo panning, 2 channels on the left, 2 on the right. But still, there's a lot of Amiga music that makes the most of that and sounds incredible. Street Fighter 2 on the Amiga is not one of those games. Now here's our first background in this game that I'd say really doesn't come off well and looks kind of poor. It looks almost monochromatic, and it just seems washed out. So most of the backgrounds up to this point, I would say were pretty decent at least. Probably the second worst one up till now was Honda's. Probably the best looking one up to this point was Dhalsim's. Ken's look really good too though. But for this one here, for Blanka, terrible. This may be the single worst background in the entire game, actually. But I do still like to say something positive about this. that the proportions of things like, the bystanders and observers in the background, spectators or onlookers, whatever word you want to use to describe them, they actually look pretty good in this, and better than most of the other versions, despite, their very sparse and seldom seen animations. There you can see Blanka's electricity special really makes everything look bland around it in this stage. I think I do manage to get a fireball off here eventually. Oh, there we are, there's one. I think I get a second one out here, maybe before the end of this round. We'll see if I remembered correctly or not. I recorded this a couple of days ago. Oh, there's another fireball, look at that! Oh, and a third one, and it also knocked him out. 3 fireballs in 1 round. Didn't quite knock him out. Sorry, knocked him dizzy. And then we went and knocked him out afterwards. But don't get used to seeing special moves, folks, because that's probably the last fireball you're going to see in this entire playthrough. Think there are a few more hurricane kicks I managed to bust out, but I don't think they actually connected with any enemies. We'll see if I remember right. Alright, this bonus round. This bonus round in this version of the game. Look how these barrels bounce. And then watch the ones that bounce off to the right and then roll to the left. What is going on there? What kind of physics are we dealing with in this world where this version of Street Fighter 2 exists? It's like nothing I've ever seen before. And sadly, there's still 30 seconds left of this. And it just goes on. It seems like it takes forever. Do I manage to break even 1 barrel? There we are. So yeah, at least 1. I might have got 2. I don't remember. Let's see if I get any more. Oh, there's another one. I don't remember if I got one before that. But there's not going to be many more. Oh, there's another one. And there we are. The barrels definitely beat me in that matchup. Go barrels. With that, let's continue our travels and head to the USA to start dealing with the 4 boss characters. Remember, in the original Street Fighter 2, you don't fight yourself. So, here is Balrog stage. And I gotta say, again, in still shots, this looks fantastic. In motion, looks like garbage, unfortunately. But just as far as porting the graphics over, and bringing them in, they really did a good job for the backgrounds. It's sad that the rest of the game is so bad. And with Balrog here, I mean, again, fighting him in this game doesn't really feel anything like fighting him in any of the real versions of Street Fighter 2. There's what I was talking about with his little lunge forward and then his little backward and his little headbutt forward. That's the kind of silliness you can see once you get in the corner and start spamming the short kicks. Or jab punches, whatever. Round 2. And when I recorded this and I was getting ready to edit it, I thought about just showing 1 round per fighter, kind of like I did with the Human Killing Machine video, but I felt like that would just shortchange everyone a little bit too much. I wanted you to see the full majesty of Amiga Street Fighter 2. And again, I just find it mind-boggling that some of the reviewers at some of those UK magazines gave this thing like 80s and 90s. The lowest review score that I found out of like the 6 magazines that I looked at was, I think, a 60 or a 65, something like that. And even that is way too kind for this game. If I were reviewing this game when it came out back in the day, the highest absolute ceiling of a score I could have given this would have been a 3 out of 10. And that would just be for the good graphics, that we have in just the still backgrounds and everything, and the way the characters look. I'll give it a 3 for that. When it comes to gameplay, though, it's practically non-existent. Now, don't get me wrong, it's nowhere near as bad as something like Human Killing Machine, or the Amiga version of Street Fighter 1, which, I mean, both of those games are so slow, it's barely tolerable to even press buttons and, try and play them. This one has some speed to it, at least. So even though it's choppy, and even though it doesn't feel as smooth or as, just responsive as the original, I mean, you can play it. It's not quite the chore that playing Street Fighter 1 on the Amiga is. That's a game that if I ever show you, in a complete trash episode or anything, I'm definitely only doing 1-round fights. Because that one takes forever because of how slow it is. Anyway, there's Vega out from round 1. My Vega fights, just so you know, this one I probably spent close to 20 minutes on. This was the worst fight in the game for me. He was just slaughtering me over and over again. His moves were just too quick. His jump attacks canceled all of mine. I couldn't find a single thing that would reliably hit him, and take precedence over whatever move he was doing. The best I could do was try to get myself in a corner and just spam those short kicks. Hope we could get him a few times, get him dizzy, then maybe hit him with some of those roundhouses. When I say roundhouse, I'm not talking about the actual move, I'm talking about the button you would press in the arcade to execute, that 2-phase kick, where Ryu kicks straight up on the first phase, and then, diagonally up and forward in the second part of it. I think I'd been trying to throw a fireball there. A lot of the times when you see me hitting the punch button, that's me trying to throw fireballs, or trying to do a dragon punch. I never successfully got a dragon punch to happen during this playthrough. But anyway, there's Vega down. This bonus stage, first off, why did they decide just in here to throw in Zangief's, ending music from the regular arcade game? And why did they make these oil drums practically invincible? Look at how many times I hit these things. I don't manage to destroy a single one of these in the entire time allotted during this bonus round. And this is another time where, for some reason, the background characters, the spectators, don't animate at all. And I think some of them did in Zangief's actual stage. I'd have to go and double check that, but I'm pretty sure at least a few of them did. Anyway, watch me hilariously try in vain to destroy any of the oil drums as time runs out. Alright folks, only 2 enemies left to go. Here is Sagat. Now, in most other versions of the game, I really try to defeat him with the Dragon Punch, because I find it poetic since that's what he was scarred with, technically when you won in Street Fighter 1. Couldn't make it happen here, because like I told you, I wasn't able to successfully do a single Dragon Punch in this game. And there we go, I got him dizzy, and then here's me just determined to throw a fireball from the left side of the screen, and I could not make it happen. It did not occur, not once. And when I played this, for the actual recording, my total playtime was roughly 1 hour, and I whittled this down to 25 minutes. By cutting stuff out, including the load screens, losses, and stuff like that. In all that time, in that whole hour, I never got a fireball working from the left side of the screen. So there you saw me get a hurricane kick, and I managed to get over to the other side. You would think if I got the hurricane kick working on that side, I could get the fireballs working on this side, but yeah, no. Really just those ones in Blanka's stage, and I think maybe 1 or 2 others from fights I lost that were cut out. Also screwed up here, when Sagat throws his high fireball, you can't duck underneath it, it hits you. You have to jump over both his low and high fireballs. We'll jump over them or block them, but you cannot duck underneath the high one. And here we go, we've got him down to almost nothing. Who's gonna win? Is it gonna be him or me? I think you know the answer here because of what I've said before. And there we go, we throw him to take off just that little sliver of life that he had, and finally Sagat is taken down. And I can't tell you how unsatisfying it feels to not take him down using either a Dragon Punch or at least some regular Street Fighter 2 staple moves for Ryu. Oh well, what can you do? Alright, and here we are. Our final battle in the entire game versus Bison. And I just gotta say it, Bison goes totally apeshit in this game. He is just on from the second that bell rings, so to speak. You've really got to engage him immediately and try and find ways to strike him and to use moves that'll take precedence over his own, and it's tough to do that. This was a really difficult fight to win. And I didn't spend quite as much time as I did on Vega while playing against him. I think this one I spent only like maybe 10 or 15 minutes on. But still, It took me a while. I had to do this fight a lot, because I was trying to be strategic at the beginning, and match up moves and things like that, but that just totally didn't work, so instead I had to go to the old reliables, find one move I could spam in some fashion or another that would hit him more times than he was able to hit me. So, I kind of found that in the standing, straight jumping kick, one that I described how to do a little bit earlier, and I'm having some success with that. It's not going perfectly, and it wasn't going to, and I'm okay with that. I was just glad that after a while I could find anything at all that was actually working against him, no matter how simple or cheesy it was. And again, it was so frustrating doing this. As far as difficulty goes, even on the standard difficulty with this game, if you're trying to play it for real, you're looking at levels of difficulty somewhat near Super Turbo in the arcade. And that game, as you know, insanely hard. This one, even on the standard difficulty, insanely hard if you try and play it normally. But if you find a way to try and cheese it to death, well, buddy, that's your best option, and that drops that difficulty down from, let's say, maybe a 9 to like a 5. And I was almost surprised to see that we had any semblance of an ending in here. I was really expecting the good old game over. And I will say, back in the day, I never bothered playing this all the way through. I only played it a bit to check it out, even though I had it. And they do have a lot of the components of the ending here. None of the animation, which is expected. But they do have most of the ending itself. And we get still shots on parts that were animated like this, but at least you've got something. And look, they even did a slight grammar correction here versus the original. Good for them. Well, folks, that pretty much does it for Amiga Street Fighter 2. Our long nightmare is at last at an end. But this video isn't quite over yet. Stick with me for just one more minute or so while I wrap things up and tell you a little bit more about Amiga Street Fighter games and just summarize this. Okay, let's end this farce. Street Fighter 2 for the Amiga is a disaster. There would never have been a perfect version on the OCS Amiga hardware, since it just had too many hardware limitations compared to the original CPS-1 board. But there could have been a really good version. Now, there are also ports of Super Street Fighter 2 and Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo on Amiga platforms, and sadly, none of them turned out very good, each suffering from various issues. And the other two ports are on the AGA Amigas, so those are the ones that have way more colors on screen and run a lot faster. But those are stories for perhaps another time. Anyway, what do you think? Did you play this version of Street Fighter 2 on the Amiga back in its heyday? Was today your first time seeing it? Want to tear it a new one? Tell me all about it in the comments. That'll do it for this video, my retro gaming friends. If you enjoyed the video, please like and share it online somewhere. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of my videos. If you want to be a swell person and support the work that I do here, you can do that via Patreon, Ko-fi, or right here on YouTube through Super Thanks or channel memberships. With that, I'll say thanks for watching, and see me later.